Can't decide if you want to play an adventure game or a turn-based strategy game today? Well, good internet person, don't fret, because Sunday Gold is here and they've just removed your need to decide by throwing both genres into a blender, hitting pulse, and creating a mostly tasty experimental fusion game. The two game types sit neatly side by side. You'll spend time in a 2D adventure game environment examining and picking stuff up, and suffering through a wretched assortment of minigames. Then, when enemies show up, which they frequently do, you'll spend time playing a 3D turn-based strategy fighting game. The connecting thread, the middle of the Venn diagram between these two game types, is action points. It's like you're playing Monkey Island, but every time you want to pick something up or act on something, it costs you action points. I know that sounds terrible, but this thing they've created by smashing two disparate genres together head first mostly works pretty well. Now, of course, it's not without its particular annoyances. For instance, you'll commonly find yourself running out of action points, which requires you to end your turn to replenish the points. But doing so raises the alert level for nearby patrolling enemies, and more often than not, you'll spawn in some random mobs. So in order to do something simple like pick up a fuse, you'll inevitably end up having to laboriously spend 5 minutes fighting first. I started getting really tired of the combat after a while, partly because it's too frequent, but partly because it had diminishing returns on fun. Then there's an awkward thing that happens when you want to use an item, but it's in another character's inventory. You could in theory just switch to that character and perform the action, but that character is out of action points, so now you end up having to go into the inventory, give the item in question to the character with the action points, before you can proceed. This separate inventory's quirk maybe doesn't sound like a big deal on paper, but in game it feels like a conspicuous lack of streamlining. It has a cumulative negative effect on your quality of life. There are unfortunately a few such weird design conceits that have arisen from making a split personality game. So who, what, and when are we in this game? Sunday Gold has some good world building with its super violent London monsters running amok in a 2070 dystopia. The three dirtbag criminal anti-heroes you play are well drawn and differentiated, and as a bonus they all swear like drunk sailors, trying to outdo each other in a foul language competition.
Sure, Cab, no problem. And also, get me the fuck out of here!
While it's good enough to get the job done, the plot is fairly basic. It trots out the tired old trope of mega rich guy, shady giant corporation, evil ambitions for eternal life, etc, etc. Sunday Gold oozes slick style. For the most part, it's got a definite unique look and feel, a unified overarching art direction that is well presented and polished. There are the cool slide transition comic book style interstitials, bright and loud pop art action callouts in combat, rapid cuts that set a snappy pace, and frenetic camera work. But Sunday Gold also has bipolar disorder, perhaps an inevitable side effect of its experiments in genre blending. The adventure game parts are pretty 2D hand-drawn environments that are a joy to behold and explore. Sadly, the least good-looking part of the game is combat, which is a shame because you'll see it frequently. Combat takes place in 3D with fugly, barely animated character models and minimalist environments. I got the feeling that the animators all went to the pub and forgot to come back. This game is extremely sparsely animated. For example, instead of your characters walking through the environment, they snap from one set location to another. This is accompanied with a static buzz on the screen, suggesting that you're watching everything through a CCTV monitor, and time is lapsing. It's a clever trick to get around animation that works well with the whole crime angle thing they're going for. What's more, it saves a lot of time spent waltzing from one place to another. You could argue that the lack of animation is all part and parcel of the overall crisp, stop-start, machine gun stutter aesthetic that runs throughout the game. Or, you could ask, are those animators ever coming back from the pub? Playing through 3 chapters of content to complete the game took about 16 hours. I was surprised looking at my total playtime because it felt like a lot longer, which is a problem. I recommend you pace yourself and take it in slower than I did, as it can rapidly start to feel overly repetitive and unenjoyable in longer sessions. The problem stems in part from the combat. While it's bearable in small doses, it starts to become hugely tedious with the sheer amount of fights they throw your way. You'll pick something up, hack a computer, then find you're out of action points. End your turn to replenish your points, and, oh look, another fight. Joy. On the plus side, there's a cool mechanic featuring mental composure which you'll be familiar with from games like Darkest Dungeon. If your character's composure is allowed to fall too far, they could start panicking. In combat, this means that instead of being able to take your time to choose your strategy, you get a countdown timer to rapidly choose your strat under fire. And if the time runs out, your character panics, taking him or her out of combat for that round. Having a low mental composure also makes minigames more taxing. The combat actually feels like it has a reverse difficulty curve, as it seems to get easier as you progress, unlocking cool new talents through a short, manageable skill tree. The enemies do level with you, but I actually encountered the greatest difficulty in the first chapter, where it felt so unfairly balanced that I came close to giving up. That the game seems to get easier as you go is a problem, because it gradually fails more and more to hold your interest. Another big part of the problem is the minigames. There are 3 different flavours of these abhorrent monstrosities, and you'll play them over and over again until you're begging to stop. And then you'll be made to play them some more. It's 2022, and we still have to put up with this crap? I thought the shitness of minigames was established precedent, and the only thing all gamers could agree on. I liked the turn-based combat and the adventure game parts well enough, but the minigames were a pointless exercise in testing my dexterity in repetitive, joyless ways, when I didn't want it tested at all. Now there is an option to decrease the difficulty of minigames, but there's no option to nuke them out of the game altogether. The adventuring largely involves hacking, lockpicking, and brute forcing your way into places that you shouldn't be, and each character has a specialty that you'll need to use to progress. It's straightforward enough, although towards the end of the game it starts to get more difficult in all the wrong ways, with what felt like too much pixel hunting. Also at the end, the puzzles didn't seem to flow organically into one another, and seemed largely disjointed, so I spent a good deal of time wandering aimlessly from room to room, not entirely sure what I was looking for, just spam clicking until I could proceed. There are small branching paths during the game where you get to choose your approach, which boils down to stealth versus blowing shit up. This is a cool feature, but it happens maybe 2 to 3 times in total, so I'm not sure it qualifies to get a mark in the replayability column. Overall, given the linear and finite nature of the game, Sunday Gold is not one you're likely to replay anytime soon. If it sounds like I'm down on Sunday Gold, I'm surprisingly not, and I think it's because it's a game that adds up to more than the sum of its parts. It's an ambitious attempt to differentiate, which is brave and admirable, but it's also a stylish, comic-stylized crime caper with a fresh setting, cool, foul-mouthed anti-heroes, and a standout look. There's a good, inherent change of pace that tickles different parts of your brain as you alternate between adventure sleuthing and turn-based strategizing. Sure, it has some kinks, but as long as you pace yourself and enjoy the game in small bursts, I think you'll find a lot to enjoy about Sunday Gold.